Western fiction is a genre of literature set in the American Old West frontier and typically set from the late 18th to the late 19th century. Well-known writers of Western fiction include Zane Grey from the early 20th century and Lewis Lamore from the mid-20th century. The genre peaked around the early 1960s, largely due to the popularity of televised westerns such as Bonanza. Readership began to drop off in the mid to late 1970s and has reached a new low in the 2000s. Most bookstores outside of a few West American states only carry a small number of Western fiction books. History. Pre-1850s, the predecessor of the Western in American literature emerged early with tales of the frontier. The most famous of the early 19th century frontier novels were James Fenimore Cooper's 5 novels comprising the Leather-Stocking Tales. Cooper's novels were largely set in what was at the time the American frontier, the Appalachian Mountains and areas west of there. As did his novel The Prairie, most later westerns would typically take place west of the Mississippi River. The Western as a specialized genre got its start in the penny dreadfuls, and later the dime novels. Published in June 1860, Maleresca, the Indian wife of the White Hunter, is considered the first dime novel. These cheaply made books were hugely successful and capitalized on the many stories that were being told about the mountain men, outlaws, settlers, and lawmen who were taming the western frontier. Many of these novels were fictionalized stories based on actual people, such as Billy the Kid, Buffalo Bill, Wyatt Earp, Wild Bill Hickok, and Jesse James. 1900s, 1930s. By 1900, the new medium of pulp magazines helped to relate these adventures to Easterners. Meanwhile, non-American authors, like the German Karl May, picked up the genre, went to full novel length, and made it hugely popular and successful in continental Europe from about 1880 on, though they were generally dismissed as trivial by the literary critics of the day. Popularity grew with the publication of Owen Wister's novel The Virginian and especially Zane Grey's Riders of the Purple Sage. The first Hop-Along Cassidy stories by Clarence Mulford appeared in 1904, both as dime novels and in pulp magazines. When pulp magazines exploded in popularity in the 1920s, Western fiction greatly benefited. Pulp magazines that specialized in westerns include Cowboy Stories, Ranch Romances, Star Western, and Western Story magazine. The simultaneous popularity of Western movies in the 1920s also helped the genre. 1940s, 1960s. In the 1940s, several seminal westerns were published, including The Ox-Bow Incident by Walter Van Tilburg Clark, The Big Sky and the Way West by B. Guthrie, Jr., and Shane by Jack Schaefer. Many other Western authors gained readership in the 1950s, such as Ray Hogan, Lewis Lamore, and Luke Short. The genre peaked around the early 1960s, largely due to the tremendous number of westerns on television. The burnout of the American public on television westerns in the late 1960s seemed to have an effect on the literature as well, and interest in Western literature began to wane. Western comics, Western novels, films and pulps gave birth to Western comics, which were very popular, particularly from the late 1940s until circa 1967, when the comics began to turn to reprints. This can particularly be seen at Marvel Comics, where Westerns began circa 1948 and thrived until 1967, when one of the flagship titles, Kid Colt Outlaw, ceased to have new stories and entered the reprint phase. Other notable long-running Marvel Western comics included Rawhide Kid, Two Gun Kid, and Marvel Wild Western. DC Comics published the long-running series All-Star Western and Western Comics, and Charlton Comics published Billy the Kid and Cheyenne Kid. Magazine Enterprises' Straight Arrow ran from 1950 to 1956, and Prize Comics' Western ran from 1948 to 1956. Fawcett Comics published a number of Western titles, including Hop Along Cassidy from 1948 to 1953. They also published comics starring actors known for the Western roles, including Tom Mix Western and Gabby Hayes Western. Similarly, Dell Comics published Roy Rogers Comics from 1948 to 1961, and Magazine Enterprises published Charles Starrett as the Durango Kid from 1949 to 1955. The popular Western comic strip Red Ryder was syndicated in hundreds of American newspapers from 1938 to 1964. 1970s and 1980s. In the 1970s, the work of Louis L'Amour began to catch hold of most Western readers, and he has tended to dominate the Western reader lists ever since. George G. Gilman also maintained a cult following for several years in the 1970s and 1980s. Larry McMurtry's and Cormac McCarthy's works remain notable, specifically McMurtry's Lonesome Dove and McCarthy's Blood Meridian are recognized as major masterpieces both within and beyond the genre. L. McAlton, mostly noted for his novels The Good Old Boys and The Time It Never Rained, was voted by the Western Writers of America as the best Western writer of all time. Early in the 1970s, Indiana novelist Marilyn Durham wrote two popular Western novels, The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing and Dutch Uncle. Western readership as a whole began to drop off in the mid to late 1970s. 1990s and 2000s. Readership of Western fiction reached a new low in the first decade of the 21st century, and most bookstores, outside of a few Western states, only carry a small number of Western fiction books. Nevertheless, several Western fiction series are published monthly, such as The Trailsman, Slocum, Long Arm and The Gunsmith. The genre has seen the rumblings of a revival, and 2008 saw the publication of an all-Western short story magazine, Great Western Fiction, which was published by Dry River Publishing in Colorado. Nevertheless, the magazine was short-lived and folded after only 2 issues. Organizations. Western authors are represented by the Western Writers of America, who present the annual Spur Awards and Owen Wister Award for Lifetime Achievement. The organization was founded in 1953 to promote the literature of the American West. While the founding members were mostly Western fiction writers, the organization began getting a number of other members from other backgrounds such as historians, regional history buffs, and writers from other genres. Western Fictioneers, founded in 2010, is a professional writers group that encourages and promotes the traditional Westerns. It is the only professional writers organization composed entirely of authors who have written Western fiction. Fans of the genre may join as patron members. The Western Fictioneers annual Peacemakers Competition awards prizes in many categories of Western writing, bibliography, Boatwright, Modicee, the formula in cowboy fiction and drama. Western Folklore, 136 to 145 in JSDOR. Davis, David B. 10-Gallon Hero, American Quarterly 6 No. 2 pp. 111 to 125 in JSDOR. Durham, Philip, The Cowboy and the Myth Makers. The Journal of Popular Culture 1 No. 1 pp. 58 to 62. Estelman, Lauren D. The Wister Trace Classic Novels of the American Frontier. Fleming, Robert E. The Dime Novel Western, Rocky Mountain Modern Language Association. Hamilton, Cynthia S. Western and hard-boiled detective fiction in America, From High Noon to Midnight. Jones, Darrell. The Dime Novel Western. Bowling Green, Ohio. Popular Press. Bowling Green State University. ISBN 0879720980. Jones, Darrell Emrys. The Dime Novel Western. The Evolution of a Popular Formula. Michigan State University, ProQuest, UMI Dissertations Publishing. McVeigh, Stephen. The American Western. Marsden, Michael T. The Popular Western Novel as a Cultural Artifact. Arizona and the West, 203-214, in JSTOR. Stouffer, Helen Winter, and Susan J. Rosovsky, eds. Women and Western American Literature.